So I apologize for doing this. So we'll just switch. When I see you pop up, we'll be ready.
Krista says, I get it. It happens.
Excellent. And we are now live on YouTube, Angelo, so go right ahead.
All right. Hello. Welcome to a special meeting of the Human Rights Commission. My name is Angelo. My pronouns are he, him, his. I'm the chair of the commission. And then, as always, we'll just do popcorn style for introductions, and I'll start with Mike.
Hello, I'm Mike Waters. I live in Ward 7. My pronouns are they and them, and I will pass it to Krista.
Hi, my name is Krista, and I'm vice chair in Ward 4. And I'll go ahead and go to David.
Hi, my name's David Reinhold. My pronouns are he and him, and I'm a resident of Polk County, and I'll pass it off to Bella.
Hi, everyone. My name is Bella Borja. I'm a resident of, I believe, Ward 6. Is that right, Gretchen?
I think so, from memory.
And I will go ahead and pass it on to Tricarico.
Hi, I'm Tricarico, and for the interpreters, I have a name plan, which is T Italy, to save your finger spelling. I'm a resident of Ward 2, and my pronouns are they, them, and I will pass it to Debbie.
I'm Debbie Aguilar. I'm a lieutenant with the Salem Police Department, and I'm the liaison between the police department and the Human Rights Commission. And I'll pass it to Oni.
Hi, I am Oni Marchbanks. My pronouns are she, her, and I will pass it to Dr. Irvin.
Thanks, Oni. I appreciate that. My name is Irvin Brown, and I am a resident of Ward 5. And I don't know who is left, so I gotta expand my search. And let's see, Nathan.
Hi, my name is Nathan. I use he, him, his pronouns, and I'm a resident of Ward 7. And I'll pass it on. Rain, have you gone yet? I'll pass it off to Rain there.
Hi, I'm Rain. And I'm in Northeast Salem. I'm not sure of the ward number, but I'm in Northeast Salem.
How about Abigail? I don't think you've gone yet, Abigail.
Hi, I'm Abigail. I'm a resident of Ward 8, and I go by she, her, they, them. And I will come to Drew. Have you gone yet?
No, I'm Drew. I'm a resident of Ward 3, and my pronouns are he, him, and last but not least, Gretchen.
Nice to see everybody. Gretchen Bennett, staff at the City of Salem Mayor and City Manager's Office, she, her pronouns. And if I could ask, Rain, last time I talked with you, it's so nice to see you again. I knew you as Ryan. Has your name, do you prefer to go by Rain?
Either is fine. I do use Rain, but I also use Ryan. But for the most part, I go by Rain.
Cool. Okay, thanks. Nice to know that. I just wanted to make sure. Welcome, everybody.
Yeah, welcome everybody. And then Gretchen, do you have any public comment tonight?
No, sir. I received none.
All right. Looks like we can move on to the consent calendar. Approval of agenda.
Actually,
ahead,
though,
Gretchen.
I apologize. I didn't mean I've received none, but we have a couple of guests tonight. I don't know if our guests would be interested in sharing public comment.
Oh, yeah, my apologies. Do any of our guests have anything they want to say?
I actually do, if that's okay. But I'm not sure if to hold on till later or go ahead with it now. I'm not sure what that process is, but I do have a comment.
You can go ahead. Oh,
No,
yeah, you can
go ahead, Angelo. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. You can go ahead and share right now.
Okay. So my comment was related to the police department in Salem. The issue that had just occurred. The members of the community organization. So there was a protest and we had planned and went and did that protest.
With regard to white supremacy, and it was about BIPOC.
And we noticed how it was that the police department had responded to that. We felt that it was not equal the way that they had responded to that because of the situation that we were talking about. So, and also there was a Black business leaders in the committee.
And we're hoping the Human Rights Commission can be more involved maybe with the situation.
So I was really trying to just see if we to be more proactive with that. Didn't want to just let that slide by. Because we're trying to fight for obviously equal justice, not the oppression that has been occurring. And I want to say thank you to Tricarico. So we'll see what occurs from that. But I want to say thank you for the discussion that we were having and the action that was taken.
Yeah. Thank you, Rain, for sharing that. Gretchen, have you guys had a discussion?
Oh, most certainly. I know there's been a lot of conversations if the situation is certainly what I am thinking of in terms of, I know, I believe both our police chief and city manager have had some direct communications. I know if the situation or the concern is specifically about the way in which our police department responded, we can also bring that inquiry through our police department and invite a review of that. And then if that is not satisfactory, we have the Community Police Review Board set up to review unresolved complaints concerning the police department. But I know there's been a lot of statements and discussion and review of both the protest as well as the situation at the business, I think, epilogue that we're talking about. I heard Human Rights
Correct.
Commission being involved, and
yes,
we can
it
certainly
was,
explore
sorry, it
what
was
that would look like.
epilogue. Yes,
Great.
correct.
Yes.
And also the things that I had noticed in surrounding areas, it was not very inviting to be safe in that area. People did not feel comfortable. So that situation also occurred. So it's just a matter of taking action and rolling our sleeves and doing what needs to be done. We're talking about specifically with the police, but really it's just in general. The comment is just in general to see what can come of that.
Thank you. One idea to continue to explore, perhaps as you look at your priorities for the year, is just what I'm hearing Rain say, which is how do you help our community convey the safety and the inclusion and the anti-white supremacy that is intended? How do you make that experience very visceral so that people can experience the safety that we want? What does that look like? How is it communicated? What are the specific actions that can be taken? Great question to explore how we can contribute into that. Your comment is timely tonight because the commission's looking at both its work plan for the year as well as what they would like to recommend to City Council. And those recommendations to City Council could either be things for council or the city, but also could include recommendations for things that the Human Rights Commission does. I mean, I think this kind of anti-racism work is beyond one meeting or beyond one action, and it's really an ongoing set of actions. And so perhaps I think your comment is well positioned as we begin this discussion tonight, because we can be keeping that in mind as we identify a pathway for the commission's work this year, as well as a pathway for the kind of recommendations that you want to offer back to mayor and council.
All right, thank you. And again, I thank you, Rain, for sharing this with us. I think it was right. It's right what you said. You can't let this slide, because if we let things like this slide, we will never improve. And so again, I thank you. And does anybody have any questions or comments?
I guess I would have, this is Drew, right? I guess I would have to ask, because it's been a while since I've been to a meeting, and this seems fairly new. I'm kind of curious as to a little more detail of what the incident was that brought rain to us.
I don't know, Rain, if you'd like to share from your perspective, or if others would, or Lieutenant Aguilar, I don't want to put you on the spot. I don't know if you'd want to provide a brief piece.
Do you mind repeating the question again?
If I could get because it's been a little bit since I've been to a meeting, so I'm still trying to catch up. So I'm trying to get a better perspective as to the incident that Rain is talking about.
Well, I don't have notes in front of me, and
I don't mind. I can share a little bit, but basically the city had an event happen that had been planned and organized, and it was like maybe there was even a couple different incidents that were planned, but then there was a counter protest that happened at the same time and became pretty awful and contentious. And some of the community members and the people who had been involved had some resolution, and some people decided not to get involved because of that counter protest. But there was another group that they were basically looking for someone to fight. They were looking for trouble. And so they were looking for like the people who were advocating for those people of color and the BIPOC, people that were against them. And so it became pretty contentious. And then there was a Black-owned business that had graffiti, some vandalism that happened against it, that's located in Salem. And there were, people, they were not innocent. There were people out there that were using alcohol in public out in the park. There were people that had some weapons. So this wasn't just a casual thing, but the police just said, well, we didn't see it, sorry. Or, also said that, everyone has a right to gather and to protest, and kind of, I felt like it made excuses. So I think there needed to be a little more of that. So there was kind of some pandering to some groups, and then others didn't feel like they were treated, fairly. Like some of the marginalized people felt like they were kind of the ones that the police, took offense against their actions. but the others were kind of, we were treated differently. It didn't feel like it was fair that people were treated equally. So the people who are making the threats against the BIPOC group, or it seemed like there were racial slurs used, throughout that, and it just felt like that's, it's not all right. It's not comfortable. Insults and different things were being said. It was a very uncomfortable situation, and it just doesn't seem like that should be something that just gets ignored. So we feel like the city should also feel outraged as we did, and that it should be kind of more of a shocked response rather than just kind of like, oh, well, we'll talk to them, and making it not be such a big deal. So it didn't feel like the two sides got treated equally to the behaviors that were done. So that's basically the basic line.
I can understand now.
And I can sure appreciate, and I'm glad that you shared and spoke how that was received. I know I was also just around a number of people from the city who were very concerned and are very much wanting to be sure that their own hatred for anything white supremacist and their own commitment to everyone feeling safe, it felt very urgent for many that I work with as a city employee. I know there were some communications shared to try to get at answering questions and sharing information that may be helpful to the group as well as part of the conversation.
This is the interpreter for the group, meaning the Human Rights Commission. This is the interpreter getting clarification. When you said it maybe would help the group, meaning this group?
Yeah, like I think it's out on our city webpage. I know that it was a topic of interest to the community, and the chief shared some information, and I believe there's some information on the webpage that's available that might help with the conversation.
Ms. Ryan, okay, I think, there's, after I think some push and some meeting, we did notice that some more communication happening and some more information getting out there about the decisions, about arrests, about the different thing happening. It did seem like that started to happen, but it required some push. And I don't feel like the city should be waiting until someone pushes for that. That should be something that's just happening. You don't have to wait until someone gets harmed or it becomes elevated to a more serious level. So that's kind of that concept that I had.
Certainly, thank you. I'm glad you're saying that. I don't know what goes into analysis or gathering information following an incident, and I wouldn't be able to speak to that, but certainly hearing your point.
Any more questions or comments?
I have a question then, since Gretchen, you brought that up about analysis. Lieutenant Aguilar, can you tell us how incidences like that are treated, or what's the training for officers? I mean, I know, there's lots of conversation about balancing freedom of speech, and also at the same time, this is a huge concern for the community, and with City Council's commitment to anti-racist work. What is the police's response? How are they trained, and I guess how has it changed moving forward?
So when an incident, or not incident, so let's say there's going to be a protest or a rally, and we anticipate there's going to be maybe either a large group or there's going to be protesters and counter protesters. We develop what's called an op plan, an operational plan that sets out our guidelines, our rules on really what's our objective. And usually the objective is almost the same, which is, protection of life, protection of property, that kind of thing. So after it's all said and done, then we do what's called an after action report. And that after action report is really meant to be kind of like it's meant to be a critique. It's meant to talk about what we did good, but it's also meant to talk about what we did bad. Because I will tell you that we're not perfect. We have not been perfect in the past. And we always strive for, in those after action reports, to really be open and honest with what could we have done better. And some of that is just planning. Some of that is we just didn't think there was going to be the large group of counter protesters, and so we weren't prepared. So anyway, so that after action report is what we use to, again, try to make ourselves better and improve upon what we did maybe not so well in the past. I know that I think we have, so historically, we really never had many riots, protests, counter protests. So this was kind of new to us. So it's kind of like learning how to put out a fire when your house is already fully engulfed in flames. You know, you're trying to like figure out how to do that. I mean, and not that we didn't have any idea. I mean, we clearly had plans, but we just we weren't perfect at it. And I think as we have moved forward, I think that we have done better in making sure that we're prepared, making sure that you know, we have to kind of balance. So, you know, people want us to be fair and be equal, but we also hear, well, we don't want you dealing with the little things, dealing with the little law violations. And so we have to kind of balance, like, do we want to do the little law violations or not? Sometimes when we focus on that, then we lose the bigger picture, which is we've got to manage like a crowd of 300 that are wanting to fight, or one group is certainly wanting to fight the other. So yeah, so I guess my long-winded answer is that we do a critical review of how we manage those situations to try to improve. And I think we're getting there. Epilogue, I can't get into too much of the case because it's with the district attorney's office, but we were able, Detective Ramirez actually he's an officer now, he was a detective. Officer Ramirez was able to make an arrest on that case. So, you know, sometimes it takes a while to do the investigations because, I mean, we want to make sure that we put together a good case. If we make an arrest right away and then the DA's office doesn't file or the person gets acquitted, then it doesn't hold any, you know, it's not justice for anyone. So, so anyway, I don't know, does that kind of answer your question? I'm kind of rambling probably, but.
I think it gives some context. Sorry, this is Bella. I think it gives some context. I guess what I want to know is seeing for the last few months what's happening across the nation, right? What's happening here in our own community. What policies does the City of Salem Police have for antagonizers or counter protesters to ensure that, you know, I mean, sorry, I'm trying to think of my words and be very thoughtful about it, but what strategies does the City of Salem Police have to manage counter protesters who are there to egg people on, who are there to, you know, cause that chaos? Because, you know, we see people peacefully protesting, and we know that counter protesters are going to be there. So what can we do, or what is the City of Salem Police doing?
Yeah, so yes, we do have to again balance, even though we may not agree with it, we can't not allow those folks at the Capitol or on the streets. So our management is just that, making sure that we have an adequate presence, making sure that those two groups are stay apart, as much as we can. And that means that if maybe one group wants to march to where the other group is, we're not going to allow that, to keep the group separated. So that really is, and then, like I said, having adequate staffing. So having adequate staffing to make sure that we have enough officers, especially when you have multiple groups in multiple areas, with the potential for those two groups to be interacting in multiple areas. It can drain resources pretty fast. That's why we often partner with Oregon State Police and Marion County Sheriff's Office, because it's a drain. So we can't all do it alone. So we partner together. So that really is the staffing and making sure that we keep them separated. And then, picking out the people that are actively causing problems. Like usually groups have instigators, usually have 1 or 2 or 3 that are kind of out there doing things, and they like to do things and then they go back into the group and they try to hide. So trying to identify those people and pick them out of the group to get them away. Sometimes that is the challenge, is they're very good at getting back in the group, changing clothes. They have a lot of different strategies, but that is the goal, essentially.
I have a question to follow up on that. So you talked about making an ops plan and you talked about the action report. So 2 questions there. When you're making the ops plan, how do you ensure that bias doesn't come into play, especially on a police force that frankly isn't diverse? And how do we know that the person doing that ops plan is, again, checking for bias and, doing a really thorough investigation, especially because these aren't just protests. A lot of these protests have some pretty say about the police force. And I would imagine that as a police officer, there's probably a lot of personal emotion involved when you know that some of those protesters are against policing. And whether you agree with that or not, like you said, it is your duty to protect those persons' rights. So I'm curious, how does the police force mitigate that, if at all? And how do they review that when they're doing that check? Because that's a very large concern of mine. And we've seen an established pattern of any groups that may be associated with protesting police brutality getting not great treatment, while other groups who are frankly white supremacists and not really protesting for rights getting other treatment. It just keeps happening. So I'm concerned about that, and I'm wondering what's in place or what could we do to support the police department in making sure that doesn't happen further.
So it's important to understand it's not an investigation. It's essentially a kind of a roadmap, if you will, of, because we don't know what's going to happen. So it's fairly vague in that it, like I said, it'll have essentially what the key points are, what the goals are. And the chief actually did a really good job. I can't remember which one it was. It might have been, I can't remember which protest it was, but he put out on social media, like, this is our mission statement. So number 1 is protect lives. Number 2 is protect property. Number 3, I think was to ensure that this was after the Capitol takeover, to ensure that no public or private buildings are taken over, and that no streets are blocked. And then And then 4 was, I think, to investigate any crimes. Sorry, hang on a second. Cat's going crazy. To investigate any crimes either at the moment or as a follow-up. So that kind of sets the tone. So that gives you a sense of, we're not out there saying we're not going to allow certain people in a certain area, or we're not going to allow certain types of speech to be allowed. It is essentially, those 4 elements are what our mission is. And so then it sometimes will break down into, okay, some of the other key elements are, if there are opposing groups that do come into the mix, then the key is to keep those separated. We won't allow them, whatever. If we have intelligence that comes in that says, we know that that a particular group might be coming in with plans to go downtown and destroy businesses, that part of the plan may be, if any large group starts marching towards downtown, we're not going to allow them into a certain area. We're going to keep them out of that area because we have intelligence that they're going to be potentially damaging buildings. So it's, when you ask, like, how do we ensure that no bias is inputted into this operations plan? I suppose I don't really necessarily have a good answer as far as that, other than just to say, how we lay out those plans are that our job is, again, to protect life, to protect property, blah, blah, blah. And so that's the goal that we have, while we still have the obligation to allow people who want to protest or wave signs or do what they want to do. We have to allow them to do that up to a certain point until they start coming together and we think that there's going to be some kind of altercation. So I don't, it's probably not a great answer, but we don't have a bias checklist of this and that. We just go by what our mission statement is, which is what our priorities are for that mission. And like I said, they're almost always similar, because you can't, in an operation like that, you can't really predict what's going to happen because they're so fluid. You could have nobody show up and then you don't have to worry about it. You can have just one side show up, which is perfect. And then you don't have to worry about the 2 groups coming together. Then you just have to worry about, making sure there aren't any fights and that kind of stuff. So I know it's not a great answer, but that is how it's developed. I would be curious to hear your thoughts on how one would go about doing some kind of bias check, either prior or post operation, and what those thoughts would be.
Does the police force do any kind of bias training as part of like a routine thing?
Yeah, we do. We have a racial bias policy. We do racial bias and bias in policing training. We do implicit bias or unconscious bias training. So we do that.
And do you have anything in place for, like, in the moment that a police officer can say to another police officer, like, hey, something's wrong here? And on top of that, I would say that there's a great suggestion for you right there, is implementing more bias checks and more tools to really hold yourselves accountable. I mean, I'd love to see if any of these reports can be made public. There isn't a lot of great transparency right now, and maybe that's something we can discuss later when we're discussing recommendations for the response to the mayor. But I'm hearing no, there is no check for bias, and that's a huge red flag, because when we aren't checking and we aren't aware, that means there's one already there. And again, I don't think this is that the police officers woke up and were like, yeah, I'm gonna, mess up some police protesters today. But if we're not aware of that stuff, that can be the outcome. And we've seen that outcome play out. So that might be a great place to start.
This is Rain. I wanted to add something as well. I wanted to add to what Tricarico had said. I wanted to emphasize the part where the police department has the responsibility to be able to check afterwards also what had occurred, to discuss that and figure out if there was anything that can be improved. And there's this whole checklist that you were talking about and different points. And it's just the point of it being that there's nothing to check them. What we're talking about, the police, they do research, they do some research and some investigations or whatever it is that needs to happen for that. But when there is a group that's already established and is considered a counter protest group, that's already been planned for if they're gonna show up at that event. It's just having more eyes on that and more attention to that situation, just to make sure everyone is safe, is kind of the point. If no one takes accountability and no one has accepts the responsibility for that, then nothing's going to get done. So during that protest, if they were to see those with weapons, they could not come towards where that protest was happening. So there is an attention that is being paid to what's happening during that time, but it doesn't get recognized, and nothing really gets done unless something actually happens. It should not be that situation. There needs to be attention given prior to an incident occurring.
I wonder, before Mike jumps in, if Deb, did you need to respond to anything there, or should we move to Mike?
No, I think that, Rain has excellent points. Absolutely. Yeah, he has excellent points, and I think that with the community audit that's happening, I think that the audit company can provide us with a lot of valuable insight into, what are we doing that is good and what are we doing that can be improved upon. And we certainly don't have all the answers. And so the audit company, I'm sure, has seen different departments that do have different ways of handling these types of events that maybe aren't so good and maybe are way better than what we do. And so I think that, that kind of information, I think, is valuable as part of that checks and balances of, because they're reviewing everything that we're doing. So what are we doing good and what are we still needing to improve upon?
Really quickly, I want to say that it's really important to listen to the community when they say, this is what you need to do, and this is what you need to improve on. The audit is great, but our community is the one being impacted.
Yeah, and I think that that's why the audit has reached out and included so many community members and community groups, because that is the way that the community can provide their input in a greater way, is to provide that to the audit company and then filter that on to us. And the Human Rights Commission is another way that that information can get to us. Yeah.
I do have a question. So is this audit a part of your after action report, or who does your after action report? Is this an internal thing within the police department, or is this communicating with other committees and seeing with the community exactly what was going on and what looked to be good and what didn't look good? My other question was also, when you're coming up with plans, I believe I heard the police department didn't expect for things to go the way they did. When you're preparing yourselves, I'm not sure about you, but when I prepare, I'm going to always think of the absolute worst case scenario. What am I in the worst case scenario? And so it kind of seemed like maybe that's not what was happening. I'm also going to be reaching out to other organizations, well, other police departments, to see how have you handled this situation? What was effective? What wasn't effective? What did the community respond back to you? And then also come back to my department, my police department, and say, okay, this is what we've gotten back. Let's see how this will work for the.
Yeah, the audit that I was talking about is the audit company that was hired by the city to review the police department. So they're reviewing all aspects of our police department. One portion includes our response to protests, and that includes looking at all of the documentation. So that was the audit. As far as the operation plan, which is the plan prior to the event, and the after action report, which is the review after the event, those are completed by a lieutenant who is over the team that responds to those types of events. So and then they're reviewed up through our chain of command. So there's a kind of a within our department, a holistic review of those plans. And when I say so now it's getting a little bit, even a little bit more difficult. But a lot of the information that we gathered from whether these events were going to take place or not are from they're all from open sources. So social media, Facebook, all those sites. So, sometimes we'll look at the sites and they'll say maybe there are 30 people that are going to go, and then 200 people end up showing up. So that's where but you're right. We generally are, hey, we're going to plan for the worst and hope for the best. Some of it is because the Capitol grounds, so it's kind of odd. The Capitol grounds aren't our jurisdiction, so we don't really have responsibility for them, but we support Oregon State Police. So we're not going to allow Oregon State Police to be in a situation where they can't handle the response, or they're not prepared. So some of it is, us trying to get ready and go and help support the Oregon State Police if something happens on their grounds, and vice versa. If something happens in Salem, they come and support us. So I guess I shouldn't characterize it as we're completely caught flat-footed, but certainly we have learned from past experiences that having a larger presence, even if nothing happens, is preferable, because you're exactly right. You plan for the worst and then hope for the best.
I've got Mike ahead of Bella. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Debbie. We had Mike and then Bella, and then after that, I think we should do a quick check-in on the time and agenda. Mike, go ahead.
I just very much echo what Tricarico was saying about bias. And in our last meeting, we talked a little bit about the reporting. So you had, or the intelligence, I should say. So you had, or what you stated was that you had intelligence that there would be violence by the one group. And then you had another group that showed up open carrying weapons. And I think where the bias to me comes in is that the intelligence overrode what was actually happening on the ground, meaning that however that intelligence was drummed up, I think that's the concern when it comes to bias and you're creating your ops plan, is that the intelligence and how that is evaluated and how that is compared to what you're actually seeing I think is just something that really, really needs to be examined. And I think it was very, I don't know the right word, it's late, but it was very good for Tricarico to raise that issue, because I think that is the crux of the issue, that the police would walk into the situation having an impression of what was going to happen rather than paying attention in the moment to what was really going on.
Yeah, and I definitely don't want to give that sense that we're relying on just the information and not looking at what is going on. Because yeah, absolutely. I mean, we look at intelligence and we evaluate it, certainly, because that's important to us. But you're absolutely right. It doesn't overvalue what we are actually seeing out there, and that's why operation plans are so broad, because really what we are seeing is more important, because maybe what our intelligence told us isn't necessarily what we're seeing happening on the street. So yes, thank you, Mike. I don't want to give that impression that that we're just going blindly in, relying on what we're hearing or seeing on social media, because we all know social media isn't always as accurate as it can be.
I'll just, I guess for myself, end with, it sounds like, Debbie, you mentioned, sorry, Lieutenant Aguilar, you mentioned tone.
Debbie, it's fine.
You mentioned tone, and it really sounds like at this point in time, even though we've seen multiple instances, that the tone of the Salem Police Department is still focusing on largely the procedural piece, what to do, to ensure safety and but I think what our community, it sounds like that they're really craving is a shift in tone from, just focusing on the procedure to actually focusing on the human beings who are being impacted. And a part of that piece, that we're seeing in this tone that is being set currently by the police department is that people who are, white supremacist groups, people who are coming to antagonize peaceful protesters are getting better treatment, feel potentially that they have more respect because the peaceful protesters' positions are opposite of that of the police. And so what kind of conversations is the Salem Police Department committed to having in order to set a different tone, in order to make people actually feel like they can go out and peacefully protest and not be hurt by, whether physical or through the emotional labor that it takes to deal with police response. Because if both sides are, if the goal is to respect both sides, what we have seen is that there really hasn't been. And what conversations and commitments is Salem Police willing to make?
Yeah, I appreciate that, because we don't absolutely want one side to feel like we're playing favorites, because that certainly is not our intention. And actually, I think Chief Womack, and it's gonna escape my mind where it's at. I want to say it's on the city website, but I think Chief Womack did a great job in one of his probably earlier communications with the community. I think set the tone very well by saying that white supremacy does not have a place in Salem Police Department, in our philosophy, nor in the city of Salem, and that that was what he wanted the citizens to know, that is his philosophy. He expects his department and his officers to have the same philosophy, and that we'll carry that through in our actions, both when we're responding to calls for service as patrol officers or when we're responding to one of these types of events. So, and I have no doubt those conversations are going to, communications are going to continue, and that those conversations, I know that he is anxious to start those with communities. And I'm not always involved in every committee or every meeting. So I'm sure those have started. I couldn't tell you how many or when, because like I said, I'm not always involved, but yeah, I think that Chief Womack and everyone in the police department, I myself especially, are very much committed to moving us forward and listening to the community and hearing what the community has to say, and trying to take that and really use that in a positive way when we're responding, when we're developing, like Tricarico said, when we're developing our plans to respond to these events, when we're developing our policies, in all the different aspects of the police department. So yeah, I can definitely appreciate what you say, Bella. Thank you.
I think it's just a really important point to make sure that we don't forget it's right now that there is a gap between the statements being put out and the experiences that people have. And so maybe more transparency about what commitments, the police department has to make sure that the people who are doing that really frontline work are actually living the philosophy of the department.
Yeah, we're trying to do that. I know that we have tried to make our presence on social media and some of our, not philosophy, but when we have an event, kind of be more open to what's going on and what are we doing and what are our goals, what do we want to see happen in the event. So I think as we move along, I think hopefully you'll start seeing that or feeling that's what we want to do, is we want to see have that experience where what you're hearing and what you're saying are gelling or meshing.
I noticed Oni had her hand up, and I know we want to hear from you, Oni, and then I do want to check in on time.
Okay, I don't have a question. I have a statement, an observation of, it seems to me that we have unarmed Black and brown people with white allies marching for one thing, and then on the other side you have fully armed tactical gear people marching on the other side, and they're policed differently. Historically and presently, they're still policed differently for some reason. And then the Black and brown people and the white allies, we're marching for humanity rights. We're asking for equity and equality, and we're asking for resource and opportunity. And we're just asking to be treated as human beings. And we're marching because Black and brown bodies are being murdered, across the nation through police brutality. And so I think my question is, in just what I ponder, is that why is there a counter protest to that? So for me, when there's a counter protest, when Black and brown people are asking for those things, and there's a counter protest to that, it just seems like to me that those counter protests are a container for racism to stay alive. It's just a container to hide behind, oh, we have to protect everybody's rights. And it's a lot of racist, hateful rhetoric that goes on, a lot of baiting and a lot of provoking that goes on. And I'm like, why are you counter protesting? And we're just saying that we want to live, that we have a right to exist in this community and feel safe. I don't get why there's a counter protest to that. And when that's allowed, it just keeps that container of racism alive. And how can we address that without hiding behind, oh, it's the rights of everyone? So the root of it is racism. What are we going to do to outlaw racist acts, racism, and make that something, so a thing in our communities, so that we get to feel safe?
Well, I imagine that's the question that might drive the work this year, right? Because of course, I don't know that anyone knows what else to do. And that might be where we need everyone's help. The fact of the matter is there are laws that drive the systems right now. And perhaps some of the work is in dismantling laws. Maybe some of the work is in examining policies. There's a lot to unpack in what you just said, and that just might be the roadmap. Individual people and individuals involved in it will be limited by what the laws are and have to abide by those. And so I don't know, if I were Debbie, I wouldn't know how to not work in that construct because of the requirements of the position. I know when someone reports something to me that I abhor, I don't have a legal way to do anything about it, you know, and it creates questions that we can work on together and unpack. I do want to check in really quickly. I recognize the real importance of this conversation and have so appreciated everybody participating in it. And I also know that you're wanting to talk about what you want to do this year. And so I just wanted to check in. We haven't heard from everybody, but we've heard from a lot of people around the table. And so I've predicted that it's been okay to keep going. But I did want to check in. Angelo, Krista, I might turn to you and just see how are you doing, or does anybody have comments on where you want to go from here? If you want to keep the conversation going, it's absolutely your choice and decision, but I wanted to check in.
This is Krista. I think maybe if we just took a look at the agenda, and if we all decided as a group, then maybe we could see if we want to put that aside for this conversation, or maybe just taking a look to see what's left on the agenda and then making a group decision.
Yeah, Angela here. I think that our work plan development relates to this, because with our work plan development, we will discuss what we want to do with the city, you know, the city recommendations and all that. So I think this conversation goes with the work plan development, but I wouldn't be against continuing this conversation, whatever the majority of the commission wants to do.
This is Mike, and I think this is the work. Is this topic in Salem right now, because this was one of the times since I've been on the Human Rights Commission that I've been personally have just felt a little bit hopeless about the situation in Salem, and have felt angry, and at many different points have felt the question that keeps coming back to me is, what does this commission do and what do we stand for? And I am a firm believer that the people who showed up to tell us tonight, Ryan Rain in particular, as a community member coming in, are the ones who need to hear from us. So in terms of a work plan, fighting racism sounds like a good overall goal. And of course, there's a lot of detailed work that goes into that, and we can get to that. But I'm comfortable with the conversation going as long as it needs to.
This is true. I'd have to say I agree with Mike, and I agree with Angelo and everything. And I have to say that the timing of this, I was talking with Gretchen about it before the meeting, the timing of this couldn't have come at a better time with President Biden's executive order that he signed today regarding race and equality in America. And I wouldn't be against this being a #1 top priority of this Human Rights Commission this year. Because I honestly don't want to see Salem turn into what's going on in Portland. Because we're the capital of the state of Oregon. We're the center of the representation for our state. And we can't have this kind of thing going on as a representation of this entire state. And I would say that I would want to make this a top priority for this commission for this year, if that's okay.
I'm okay with working on this, and I agree. I also understand that it's not going to all be worked out tonight, right? And we don't have to carry out a long drawn out meeting, but we can plan sessions and we can continue the work. I mean, it's not going to all happen tonight. And I think we need to be mindful of that, of time and obligations and things like that, you know, and to know that it's an ongoing process. I know I'm not saying anything new. Yeah, I could really speak to some other things, but I'm not. I'm just gonna.
Oni, I'm going to follow up with that and say that, you know, Oni and I met and talked about this request from the mayor, because Drew is correct. Right now, the timing is great. We're finally being asked, you know, we just talked about, we want that connection to the mayor. Now we're being asked, and we started putting some ideas down. I also reached out to Rain, and asked him to come and get his ideas about what we wanted to see. And I also reached out to some of the protesters and activists in the community that were at a lot of the incidents that we're talking about today. I also reached out to Julianne Jackson of Black Joy, and I got a 3-page document with all of their ideas about the things they want to ask for. And I would love to share that with you all. It's a lot. I don't know that we'll be able to do everything or ask for everything, but it's input from the community. And the other thing I want to say is that I want to ask for the moon and the stars. Okay, we're being asked, what can we do to keep this community safe? And that's a question that people have been asking us as the HRC, what are we going to do? And that we've been wanting to get to the council. So even if something seems out there or too much or too far, I'm going to ask for it. I think we should, because, you know, we're not going to get to those really amazing places of inclusion and safety for everyone without making those asks. You know, really radical change didn't happen because people politely asked. They said, this is what we want, and this is what needs to happen.
Thank you. I see Dr. Brown's hand up.
Thanks, Gretchen. I will not take long. So just to comment and to hold space for some things I've heard. And I would like to agree with Oni, because I agree with her stance. As a Black man in the skin that I am in, we understand the sense of urgency, yet at the same time, we understand that we've been in this for a long time. And in respect to Detective Aguilar, Lieutenant Aguilar, I would also say that I think we're still waiting for the opportunity to sit down where we can discuss and have some open discussion and some courageous conversations around race. And maybe we're there and maybe we're not, but I think we should be there by now, especially as, you know, those of us that are members with the NAACP, we need to have those conversations. And thirdly, this is in reference to Drew, member Wright. Your comment in regards to, you know, yes, you know, we are, you know, the city, you know, we are the capital of the city. And yes, we don't want what happened to Portland to happen here. My pushback on that is it already has happened. we are sitting in that particular space right now. When we have policymakers opening the doors for white supremacy in our building to enter, that's concerning. So we are in a place right now where we have people who appear to be our allies, but they're actually fighting against the cause. And so my plea would be, as we, you know, hold space and we have these courageous conversations, my plea would be that we can stay at the table and stay engaged, and then hopefully move away with an action plan that those in authority are actually going to commit to and do. And what I've seen is not a lot of that. Okay. And Gretchen, I really want to comment on you sending out those links that are, linked to the city's response to, racism and their, variety of input about their resolution. So thank you for sharing that with us. I find it interesting that although there's an executive order that's been signed at the national level, that may be great and it may be a step in the right direction, but we know, for those of us who come from marginalized communities and are people of color, we know just because you sign something doesn't even mean that it's going to happen, because history tells us that. And so what I'm hearing in the midst of all of us is that, yes, we are at that crossroads where we need to make something happen, but it's that time to where we ask ourselves, when are we going to commit to it? Because words are great, resolutions are wonderful, but are we all going to sit at the table to make that change actually take place?
I would have to say, I agree with you, Dr. Brown. I would have to ask, I was just thinking about something. I know we have a lot of task forces that are under the Human Rights Commission, but this may be a stupid question, but considering what we're talking about tonight.
The easy answer, Drew, is going to be yes. But let me tell you the challenge. The reason why it is easier to talk about socioeconomic status, it's easier to talk about homelessness, it's easier to talk about religion, it's easier to talk about gender inequality, it's easier to talk about those particular things because you can walk into a room and never disclose that.
Yeah.
But when you walk into a space, whether it's a physical space or it's a Zoom virtual space, when you walk into a room, the one thing that you know about Irvin Brown is that he's Black. That's the one thing you know. You don't know what kind of car I drive. You don't know where I live. You don't know if I have $5 million in the bank or 5 cents to my name. You do not know that, but you do know that I'm Black. And so to have a conversation about race, that is the starting place. And that is very difficult for the white community. I'm just going to put that into this space. That's a very difficult conversation to have, not for all white people, but for some, that's difficult because if I were white and I opted not to talk about race, that's called white privilege because I have the privilege not to talk about race. But if you are a person of color, you don't get a day off. Every single day, you are reminded that you are different. So yes, I would agree. We need to have a conversation where we talk about race.
That just kind of, I'm sorry, again, that just irks me as a person who loves everybody. And that, that shouldn't be a thing. In America, that should not be a thing where you're, just because someone is Black or Asian or Hispanic or whatever, it's like they're wearing that as a badge of honor on them, that they could just be attacked. Like I like what you said, Dr. Brown, that they don't get a day off like a white person would. Correct. And I think that's wrong because we're all Americans. We're all in this together. We're all living in the same culture, the same communities. I'm sorry, but I feel like I'm back. I feel like seeing everything that's been going on this last year and the things that are continuing to roll over into this year, I honestly am going to be straight up and honest with y'all. I feel like I'm back in 1964.
Well,
side note, it's always been going on. It's nothing new. Your eyes might have just opened up to it. But it's it was going on before 1964, and it's been going on. It was in my grandmother's lifetime and in my mother's lifetime, and it's in my lifetime. And I'm fighting so that it's not in my children's lifetime. So, it's just a matter of what you're opening your eyes up to. I heard someone say that this is not who America is. This is exactly who America is. We're just not being silent anymore. We're just not laying down, taking it anymore and hoping that things change. And we're knocking on the door. We're in the conversations and we're consistently doing that. And we're not being quiet. We're not going away. America's always been this way.
Correct. And the final thing, Drew, in regards to whether it's 1964 or 84, when we look at the deaths that took place last year, and yes, we should honor their memory. We should recognize, the Breonna Taylors and the George Floyds, the Ahmaud Arbery's. We should. Yet, if we would peel back the layers for 1 second, it may be George Floyd for this generation, but if Congressman Lewis were still here today, he would tell us for his generation, it was Emmett Till. Emmett Till, a Black young man who was beat, mutilated, castrated, and then beat so bad that they put a 70-pound cotton gin fan around his neck and dropped him into the river. So when we think about what happened last year, it is a continuation. So for us in the skin like I am in, this is a life that we live in, and this too is America.
Someone else can talk. I'm done. I'm not taking up the entire time.
I'm seeing Councillor Nordike's hand raised, and I want to take a moment and welcome her into the conversation. You may have noticed that Councillor Nordike arrived and saw your hand up. Go ahead, Councillor.
Good evening, folks. My name's Vanessa, and I serve on Salem City Council for Ward 7, which is Southwest Salem. I'm sorry that I'm dropping into your meeting at this late hour, but I just got off another meeting that went from 5:30 until 7:30-ish. I wanted to drop in to say hello and to give you my contact information. And if you would like me to come back with a more structured time, agenda, questions, I am happy to do so. But right now, I'm just here to let you know that I'm interested in your work, that I want to learn about your work, and I want to support your work. So I also want to let you folks know that our city has so much work ahead to do. And I am one of the folks who called on the city to finally condemn supremacy, white supremacy, and racism. I've been calling it out for the last several months in my individual capacity, as have several other counselors. And you guys probably all already know which counselors have already spoken up and which ones haven't. So I know that we have a lot of work to do, and I understand that a resolution condemning white supremacy and racism is the start. It is the beginning, and it's certainly not the end. So we have a lot more to do and a lot more to come. So I just wanted to drop in to say hello. There's something also I want to make sure I bring up. There's a house of worship in my ward, the Temple Beth Shalom. And as you know, white supremacy bears a particular risk to this community. They bear a risk to a lot of communities, don't get me wrong. But I wanted to let you know that I've spoken with the rabbi there, and they've had a lot of safety concerns. And so I wanted to put that on your radar screen, that this is one of our communities that feels unsafe with the presence of white supremacists and racists in our community, that they've had to talk to Salem police about doing a security check to look at all their different entrances. They've had to make changes to all kinds of things because of safety issues. So if you have a house of worship, particularly from one of our religious minority communities in town, if you have not already reached out to them to offer your support in any way, shape, or form, please do so. For example, I invited the rabbi to come to the neighborhood association meeting that meets in the vicinity of his temple. And he said, we love it when people, when local kids use our playground equipment. Please do. We are a proud part of this community. But they've had some scary things happen. They've had some really anti-Semitic things have happened at their synagogue in recent years. So I know that they are just one of the many communities that we should be watchful of and supportive of in this incredibly challenging time. So I just wanted to point that out. So anyway, again, I'm busting into your meeting 2 hours in, so I haven't seen what you've been up to, and I want to educate myself. And I don't want you to rehash 2 hours worth of work for my benefit right now. I just wanted to do a brief introduction, and if you would like me to come back, and if you have questions for me, let me know, because I would be happy to come back and to do so. And if there are other city councilors who have, I don't know if you've had other city councilors come visit you recently, but if that is of interest to you, let me know and I can nudge them. Obviously, they're not the boss of me and I'm not the boss of them. But anyway, I just want to be here to listen, to hear what's going on, and to learn how I can be supportive. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you, Gretchen, for recognizing me. I appreciate it.
Oh, of course. And I heard you say to share your contact information. We don't have the chat enabled to ensure that everyone watching on YouTube can see, but I can email out your contact information to the group.
Thank you.
I see Ryan has his hand up. If Angela, is that okay?
Okay, and I wanted to say thanks again. I'm going to have to be leaving soon anyway. I need to leave by 8. I'm hoping to see our community, Gretchen, I appreciate your help, but fighting against the white supremacy, I really believe that we need to be more active, take action, be doing more things. Some of them can seem like little things, but just creating change. For me as a Black man, when I walk around the city of Salem, I see very, very little, I guess, that, I see reminders, I guess, within the city. And by that, I guess, I mean, like when I'm in another city, maybe you might see representation, you might see art, you might see signs, statues, or different things that have events that are happening. And then here, I feel like there's maybe an event once a year. There's very little representing my my population, and I think that we need to change. Or there's like names of streets, Martin Luther King Street, things that honor people in marginalized cultures. And I would love to see like a statue or something like that. But everything, it seems like all the statues honor people who are white. So you don't really see anything, statues that honor those who are Black. So I think as it would be great if a person of color could look around and see representation of themselves within different things that are visible in the community. That would be helpful and effective. Names of people who have been honored, like at the plaques and over at the Capitol Mall, they have different people that are recognized, and that's one example. Salem also has like the menorah, maybe like a Jewish menorah at Christmas, near around the, in December, and you start to see different representation of different minorities, Black history, Black holidays. You really don't see a lot of events in our area. Those types of things aren't recognized. So I think that it's important that we start to broaden our horizons and see that representation of all people within our community, and that people can start to feel that connection. Because when you don't see anything and people walk around, you don't see it, so people aren't exposed, there's no recognition. And it's only when there's a presenter or it's Black History Month or something that pops up that issue is even brought up, but it's not a continual basis. And people of color are just kind of a token item within the community. One thing that we could do is to make the city, more representative of all the populations, maybe is just setting up more representation, like the things that I was saying, so that we can make things more visible in the community, that there's not just one-time events, but that we have something that's ongoing as visibility that represents.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. Those are great questions. So a couple of thoughts come to mind. First of all, have you reached out as a group, as Human Rights Commission reached out to our Public Art Commission? We have a public art body that handles the city's public art collection, bringing to their attention the need to have diverse voices, diverse artists, culture, sculptors, etc., bringing that to their attention to, as we consider future art pieces to install or murals or what have you to install around the city, we should reach out to them. And if you would like, I can facilitate that. I can, or Gretchen, you might know actually better how to do that. But I would propose that you speak with our Public Arts Commission about that, because I think they would be receptive and open to that. Unfortunately, part of white privilege is that, as I think Dr. Brown was mentioning earlier, and I don't mean to butcher your words, but yeah, it's comfortable to be white and to sit in your space and not have to think about how other voices, how other ethnicities, how other religions, how other creeds are represented. You can just maintain the status quo. That's all you have to do, literally nothing. So I think that would be one thing. Also, in terms of identifying, I like the idea also of coming up with more ways to celebrate and recognize Black culture in our city and other holidays that are not, frankly, traditional holidays. You know what I mean by traditional. So this is where I would appreciate the Human Rights Commission's expertise. What are some events that you can put on the city's radar screen for us to recognize? Maybe we've had in the 1 year that I've been on city council, we've had 2 wonderful presentations by 2 Native American tribes in our area. The first time that it happened, the tribe came in and we had a full-on ceremony with drums and singing and a ceremonial exchange of beaded necklaces. It was a beautiful event, and it was within council chambers. It was a great way to celebrate their Native American heritage and to do so in the council chambers, sharing and creating that space, that platform for them. Obviously, we're not meeting in person in council chambers right now, but there's no reason why we can't start thinking about other types of similar presentations to highlight other key holidays that have gone unnoticed for far too long. So I am very much open and receptive to these. And those are just 2 of the ideas that pop into my head. And I think that would be a start in the right direction. I'm certainly open to other ideas, but that's just what popped into my head.
Thank you.
Of course. Any other questions for me? Would you guys like me to come back at another time? Whatever you guys want. I wanted to be a resource to you and not completely hijack your meeting. So if you need some time to think about it as a group, that's cool too. But this isn't like your only opportunity to ask me. I'm available just a phone call or an email away, but I'm overdue in coming to you. So.
Tricarico here. I think I would want to know, I'm trying to think how to ask this because it's such a big question. Like, what level is the city looking to get from us when they're asking for these recommendations, right? Because they're asking for help and assistance on making sure everyone's safe, making sure that diversity, equity, and inclusion, I think there's some fairly obvious things that need to be addressed, like we've talked about in this meeting, like racism, police brutality. Are you looking for, hey, here's the things that need to be addressed? Are you looking for, here's how to address them? Are you looking for suggestions? Are you looking for all of the above? Because I'm so happy the city asked. Don't get me wrong. This is like Christmas as far as like, this is what we want. I also am like, oh my gosh, there's so many things. And I don't know, like, is it our responsibility to be coming up with how to tackle these things? Is the city equipped to tackle these things? if we ask them to tackle these things, how are we going to make sure that they're tackled in a way that really is hearing the community, that's making sure that the communities that are being affected by white supremacy are involved in those conversations? Because if we're not ensuring that we're including people at the table, we can and will do harm. So I'd want to know, what is it exactly that you're needing from us? And that will really help us with this meeting, which is the purpose of what is our work this year.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a great question, and I hesitate to reply on behalf of the mayor.
Sure.
Or the city council writ large. So I feel like you're asking the right questions because you want to have meaningful impact. You don't want a document that sits on the shelf with no action taken. So I think that's actually a bigger question that I would send back to the mayor, since that particular idea originated from him. I mean, I too feel that that's a big question, and I can understand why it's difficult to structure. I think that what would be helpful is to really just have more of a dialogue where members of council more regularly visit with you to understand, because I don't even know where to begin, because I have not been following your work, and I want to be honest with you honest and upfront with you about that. So I would imagine that every counselor would have their own suggestions and ideas for what we can do to move the needle on equity and inclusion in our city. Among other things, I spearheaded the effort to bring mandatory diversity training to city leadership. That included, Steve Powers, the chief of police, all the department heads, and the council as well. And I mean, that was a nice start. Let me just tell you where I personally feel we could do a lot better. And that's really an outreach. There are a lot of groups who feel unseen and unheard in our community because people don't go to them and ask them what they want and what they need. And so we see a number of folks who come to council who know exactly how to tell us what they want and what they need. And that's when we really get into privilege once again. It takes privilege to call your city councilor and say, this is a problem and I expect you to fix it. And some people feel very confident and comfortable saying those things. And some people feel like, why would I bother? That person won't listen to me. Or I didn't even know I could call that person. Would they take me seriously? I think that outreach is a huge issue. And I think that's something that everyone in city council can work on. I think that's something a lot of the individual committees and task forces can work on too. I want to make sure I concede that I am part of that problem and I need to work on that. But so do my peers and so do other representative bodies. So I feel like until I know what the community needs, why should I be blindly making assumptions about what's in the best interest of the city? I would love to see more robust participation in public testimony. Even though you're only limited to 3 minutes, and yes, it goes fast, I think it's invaluable. And we're humans, right? We're a council of 9. And I am often moved by what I hear from people who muster the courage to come and talk to us. And so that would be a starting point. I wish I could give you a very concrete answer and say, this is exactly what we want. But I'm not, I wouldn't feel comfortable speaking on behalf of my peers. I think this just goes to show we need a dialogue. We need more conversation. Your guys' organization, yeah, we need more communication is what this tells me. So
this is Drew. I would have to say that I agree with that. And I think, I was just thinking about this as we were talking. I think it would be good if we were to, when we continue talking about this and making this a priority throughout the year, that we even take it down to, because each of us represents a portion of the city. We're all in different wards, we're all in different jurisdictions. I have a feeling it'd be a good idea if we took this to our local neighborhood associations and educated the neighborhood associations, because they're also the frontline people that are dealing with this also, not just the Human Rights Commission. And that would be bringing it from the top down, moving from the council to the Human Rights Commission to the neighborhood associations, and just doing the top down. I think that would get everybody on board, everybody on the same page, and helping to make sure that our city moves forward and not backwards.
I think that's great. And by the way, I've been saying this for a long time. Our neighborhood associations need new blood. We have some incredible folks who serve on our neighborhood association leadership boards. They bring a lot of institutional knowledge. They know council procedure backwards and forwards, but we need a diversity of perspectives and lived experiences at every level. And by the way, those neighborhood associations are oftentimes a leadership pipeline for those who want to consider leadership opportunities in elected office. So if we want to build a more robust and diverse leadership pipeline, it starts local for sure. Any other questions for me?
Not really a question, but I need to take off right now, and just wanted to say thank you again for inviting me to come to the meeting. I really appreciated the opportunity. And to Vanessa, I appreciate and your recommendation of getting in contact with the Public Arts Commission. And I think just the diversity and the creativity and the art, if we can get stuff like that set up around the city, I think that would be great. So again, I just want to say thank you. I really appreciate being able to participate and look forward to coming in the future. Bye-bye.
Well, all right. Well, it was great being here. And yeah, sorry. I was just, my mind was going back to my childhood. I'm deaf in one ear. And so I rode the same bus with all the students who spoke ASL. Never learning it myself though. But anyway, that really takes me back. So anyway, I would love to come back. I know Gretchen knows how to get in touch with Public Arts Commission on your behalf. If for any reason you would like me to facilitate that or give them a nudge, let me know. If you would like me to encourage other members of City Council, you can just nod if you would like me to do that. Okay, I figured. All right. I will encourage my colleagues. Again, they don't answer to me and I don't answer to them, but I will encourage them to come and stop by so we can really build a dialogue and learn from you guys. So I will look for future opportunities when I can come at the start of the meeting and participate more fully. But I want to say thank you for all you guys do. And I've been in meetings since quite a while now, so I'm gonna head out myself. Thank you so much for all you do. Take care all, bye-bye.
Well, I'd have to say that's a pretty good meeting, huh?
Yeah, Drew, you're not off the hook yet. We still have 20 minutes, and
Oh,
and I want to use them. So,
I'm not trying to get away, Angela. I'm not trying to get away.
No worries. So I think when we talk about our work plan development, I think we can safely say that what we'll keep. So, to make this quick, we'll keep probably awareness. I'm talking about task forces. So we'll keep awareness, co-response, the LGBTQIA plus intersectional task force. I think we can all agree that those are staying for the sake of, being our work development. So I think we can all agree that those are staying. And we can all agree that the discussion we had is part of our overall yearly plan as well. And so Gretchen, did everybody receive the recommendations you had? It was like possible milestones and tasks, that sheet.
Yes, thank you. That was just emailed today, so I don't know if folks had a chance to look at it, but I was conversing with Angelo and Krista in advance of the meeting to offer, we were talking about some ways to approach the resolution, and it offers kind of some, I should have it in front of me. I'm sorry, I kind of got sidetracked with all the conversation, but it offers some possible objectives, some possible ways of breaking out like January and February and March, some questions you may have. One idea for a next step would be to kind of reflect on the document in light of tonight's conversation and see what you want to add to it. There were some really good specific ideas tonight, and maybe there's the beginning of a document. I'm really curious about what else Tricarico heard. For example, Tricarico, when you were conversing with community members, it sounds like we'll be able to have the document that Julianne and others put together in the document of voices, and maybe there's other threads or suggestions or themes from the conversations you had. I wonder if we could start receiving all of that. Maybe if everybody would reflect on the conversation, reflect on what you're moved to want to see, what you're reading, what you're hearing, and start putting stuff together. If you send me stuff, I'll compile it all into one document. You meet again next week, so it's great while it's all fresh in your minds. I would also, Mike, I'll one more thought, and then I'll the other part of it is, how do you want to do what you were saying earlier about making sure to really hear people? I love that some of you have already been reaching out. There may be other people you want to reach out to as well, just so that we're making sure to really hear and incorporate a lot of voices. And that's all.
I had a couple of thoughts, and one is that I think I'm very, very interested in what Tricarico's put together with the groups that they've talked to. And talked with Gretchen earlier about having a discussion at the LGBTQIA task force to see if there were things specific to that community. And then that got me thinking, well, so I think it's important and right and probably central to our work, given the year that we've had, that the Black voices are the leading voices. In other words, that we look at those documents with very careful eyes. But to kind of Councillor Nordijk's point earlier, I think we need to do some outreach to some other communities that are affected by discrimination and human rights issues. And I wonder almost if we should take it up a little bit in awareness task force, because we could maybe blast an email to the list that you have, for example, Gretchen, and see if we get other suggestions from other communities. And maybe through that, gathering input from various communities around Salem, that would give us the basis for a variety of asks. And we could even see where different communities maybe even ask for some of the same things, which I suspect will be the case. So that was my thinking of some ways to move forward.
I will comment that, again, it's a long document, so I'll send it and hopefully everyone can review it prior to our next meeting. I think one of the main themes that I've been thinking about a lot, and something that Oni says, and I'm sorry if I get this wrong, but if I can't eat it, if I can't see it, if I can't put it in my bank account, is it really helping the community or me as a member of the marginalized community, right? And I think the big frustration that I've heard over and over again, and Dr. Irving has touched on this too, is like, it's great to talk about it, it's great to pass this policy, it's great to pass the initiative, but what are we actually going to do? And that's kind of where I'm trying to walk that line with the city, because I know from a lot of experience and a lot of mess ups that yelling at people that this is what you need to do doesn't work. But I also know that talking doesn't work either. So I'm trying to find that line between talking and getting some actual actionable things on there. And that's where I really want all of your help in, okay, we've all got these really great ideas. We've got some really great input. We know a lot of the things that need to be addressed. How do we distill that down into actionable items? And maybe that's to, Councilor Nordike's point of it's a conversation again, but not just talking back and forth about how to get that going. I think that's the really big challenge. And that's the part I'm struggling with, because I do want to see things happen and I really want to see accountability. I want to see real things, not just, oh yeah, the chief says white supremacy doesn't have a home here. Yeah, that's great. But when white supremacists get to walk free and drink White Claws in the park, that sends a totally different message. So what are we going to do about it?
I might offer, if you don't mind, one point on that. Part of the information gathering might be reviewing or learning about actions taken in other communities, or it might be that theoretical question. I mean, what would the public policy or the political science folks say about, in this context, how do you go from what you're feeling is palpable and needed and important for safety to actionable steps cities can take? Like, maybe someone's thought that through at the National League of Cities or at Willamette University, and if there's questions, we can, while you're all noodling that, we could kick some questions over to the folks, even the librarians. Frankly, they're pretty darn good at researching questions and coming back with stuff like these 3 articles or these frameworks. Like, all of the work you did getting into equity lenses is a good example. There's some cool stuff out there. There may be people around this table who can offer some suggestions. So I just wanted to offer, we can, in addition to hearing our local voices, we can hear what's in the literature. We can, there may be some other sources too.
I often experience that a lot of the suggestions, like there are suggestions and feedback on what needs to be done, that's given without asking the Black voice, without asking the voices that need to be heard. Historically, white people have always led these conversations. They've profited off the Black experience, right? And so what I'd like to see is that you ensure that you are incorporating the communities that are affected and hearing their voices, and make sure you're centering their voices and they're at the forefront of this. And as opposed to someone who's decorated, and don't get me wrong, degrees are good and God bless you for them, but that's not what the lived experience is in the community, the grassroots of it. And it's really important that you begin to give a voice and a presence to the communities that need to be heard, to ask them, what is it that needs to happen? And if this person doesn't know, ask another person and allow us to lead.
One more thing too, that I've been thinking about as we've had this conversation tonight is that, I mean, there's a lot of symbolism in having these conversations. And one of the things that Councilor Nordike put on us, right, were these actions, and we are a volunteer group. And I think one really important thing is to also ask the city for its commitment by putting their money where their mouth is. And I don't know what that is going to look like at all. But I think that there is really a push and a call for that, to quit with all the symbolism and these blanket statements and declaration, and putting the work on, I'm going to say primarily on people who are giving their time, right? And doing this outside of this space as well. So I don't know how to have that conversation, but I think it's a commitment that truly, if once they start putting their money where their mouth is, I think we can actually start seeing things happen, versus just this, symbolic, this time in our country and we need to do this. So.
Bella, I couldn't agree more. There's a line in this document about compensating people for their time and energy, especially Black, Indigenous people of color who are leading these trainings, doing this emotional labor, and ensuring that this DEI work is a required portion of the annual budget, not an optional add-on. So yes, I agree 1000%.
Hearing those points, the budget process is underway right now. And so you might be thinking about the timeline of your work. To be able to hit the budget process, the budget committee. Well, Dr. Brown is on the budget committee. He can speak to it better than me. Dr. Brown, you want to talk to him about the budget committee? I don't mean to put you on the spot.
It's okay. I'm on the spot. Yes, this is perfect timing to discuss budgeting. And so I will solicit ideas and planning. And Tricarico, I think this would be a good opportunity to where we could probably partner and talk about some things outside of this meeting. But yes, if there ever were a time for us to, look at the budget items and present them, this would be the season, especially as we consider, diversity, equity, and inclusion work. This would be the time. So that's all I'll say to that. But yes, let's keep the conversation going. And Tricarico, let's find a way to connect outside of this space.
Yeah, Angela here. I think another thing that we really have to look at is policies, because I think we can send recommendations, but I almost guarantee that somebody's going to say, "Oh, it's not in the policy. We can't do it. It's against the policy." So maybe we should change the policy. So I think we should look at every single policy that relates to this and see, how we can change it. I think that's another thing we can work on as well. Again, it's going to be hard, but who said this work was easy? So go ahead, Dr. Brown.
Angelo, I'm going to respond to you because what you just said is a powerful statement because it connects with what Lieutenant Aguilar said earlier. When we think about the operations and plans that the police force uses, and we know for the most part that those plans are put in place and utilized with good intention. We also know that intent does not equate to impact. There could be a disconnect there. So we think about policy. Policy is a place where if we were to be honest with ourselves, that's where the hangup is. And so when we think about reviewing policies, and maybe Gretchen can talk more about this, we spent countless hours, working on an equity lens for the city to take a look at. What we know is that the city currently does not have that. And without utilizing an equity lens, we perpetuate the same policies that have been in existence for years, even decades. Case in point, if you were to go back 20 years and let's say you want to look up a policy in regards to housing, and let's say 30 years, if you go back and look at policies for housing, you're going to find out that redlining was still in a lot of our policies. And redlining, as we know, it eliminated people of color from being able to move into certain communities. That was still there. So ask yourself this, if that was still a part of the policy then, who now has been invited to the table to change that policy? And without people of color or marginalized communities having a seat at the table, those policies are never addressed. So Angela, I agree with you 100%. In order to change people and culture, we got to look at policies, practices, and procedures. And I think Lieutenant Aguilar said it perfectly. When we're trying to do this work right now, it's like we're putting out the house that's burning, but at the same time, we're trying to get out of the house. And so it's a lot that's taking place, but it's policies, practices, and procedures to where we all have to sit at the table and look at the voices who are not being heard and invite them to the table so we can review them all and change them. I agree with you.
I want to add one thing because what started thinking about as Dr. Brown, you were speaking, was for our own commission itself. I mean, largely the work that is being done is by people of color or people from other marginalized communities. I know that there has been multiple conversations about the Human Rights Commission not having a budget. And I think, you know, I think that we need commitment from the city to provide a budget for us to be able to do the work. And I don't mean to pay us for our time necessarily, but there are constraints, and there ends up not being a whole lot of ability to do things when we operate solely on, you know, waiting for you, Gretchen, to be able to find time in your day to make all these copies. And, you know, it's not truly a collaborative effort when we are putting all the work on not just people here from marginalized communities, but also from you as a staff person. And so I guess my idea for council to put their money where their mouth is to start providing us with a budget to be able to do this work.
Yeah,
And I second it. No, just kidding.
Yeah,
So are
Angela
we
here.
voting?
Hopefully soon we will. Hopefully. But yeah, I was gonna say I know when we say, hey, the Eugene Human Rights Commission has a budget, blah blah blah, and then the response is, well, you know, the city of Salem has lower taxes, you know, all that. I think money can always come in, you know. I think it's just that the city gives us a chance and gives us the budget. Because if they don't give us the budget or a chance, how do they know what we can do with that budget? And so, you know, I think it's just them giving us a chance, I think.
Well, and largely the movement for racial justice was on the backs of people who did this work for free, who worked, you know, full-time jobs, who had to figure, you know, how to make a living and also expend all the emotional energy. And so I think just symbolically, that is something that council can do. I don't know what is involved in the process, but, you know, if they're asking for suggestions, here's one of them.
So this is Drew. I'd have to say, because I've served on the city council before, and I've been through some budget processes. I would have to say the first step, I don't know if Gretchen would probably agree with this, but if we want for the council to put their money where their mouth is and provide us with a budget, I think it would be a good idea if, and I'm not saying me because I'm not good with budgets myself, but if someone took the lead on earmarking, you know, where would this money go? What different priorities do you have? What programs are you wanting this money for? How much are you looking for? Where is it being allocated? Because I think, because I can be honest with you, and you probably all can agree with this, that that's the first question they're going to ask. How much are you asking for and where is it being allocated? So I think it'd be good during this budget process, and Dr. Brown could probably attest to this, is if you're asking for that, kind of like give us an outline of what you're looking for and how much you're looking for.
And this is Mike. I think that's where the community asks that Tricarico has helped gather and that we're going to continue to gather really comes in, because we can be a conduit for creating the things that the community is asking for, then that is absolutely the right use of a city budget, in my view. So perhaps this gathering of information will bring, you know, I think when I actually do a lot of budgeting in my work, and I think when we do budgeting, it's very much what are you trying to accomplish? And so I think that's where these lists are gonna play a big role, and the voice of the community has to drive what those decisions are.
I might offer that right now the City Council is going through a strategic planning process. And intending for the strategic plan to be a big part of trying to drive priorities. I loosely understand that it's not like there's unallocated dollars. And so it's all in the context of what, if these are the priorities, then these will be things that need to be less of a priority or come off the list. It's all in that context unless new revenue can be discovered. But it would be important to key into the strategic planning process as part of that. We wouldn't want to necessarily, well, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. I apologize. Just to point that out, that conversation's occurring right now with the intent of informing the budget.
I'm also wondering if the ongoing conversations with the city where we just decide or discuss kind of who's doing what, it could be the city says, we need this training or we need this resource and we don't really know how to do that. We need you as the Human Rights Commission to find someone. And it's like, cool, let's hire someone who's an expert in that and bring them to the table, right? So that could be part of that too, is when we decide who's responsible for what, that's something that our budget comes into play, because we have folks, that have expertise in anti-racist training and trauma informed. Let's pay them to do the trainings, right? Like we have experts here. Let's use them, and let's also compensate them for their time and labor, instead, like Bella pointed out, of forcing people to do it in their free time, which they probably don't have a lot of.
Angelo?
Go ahead. Yes, go ahead.
One final thought. Gretchen, the links that you gave us to look at what the mayor said and the resolution, those links, I don't know about anyone else, but the link that should connect us to what the chief of police said, that link does not get us there. And so I'm not exactly sure if it's just on my end or did anyone else experience that too?
I'm seeing David nod and as well. Dr.
Okay.
Vaughn, I'll double check that. I'm sorry. I forwarded on the news release that the city had created, and then the most recent resolutions were PDFs attached.
Yeah.
Last night, City Council passed 2 resolutions that I thought would be relevant, but then I also just forwarded the older news release for context. I'll go see what's wrong with that link and get you something.
Oh, thank you. And please, no need to apologize. I mean, life happens and we know what you do. So we thank you, and you do a lot. So there's no apology needed whatsoever.
Thank you for your grace there. Thank you.
All right. Any other thoughts for today?
This is Krista. Krista here. I just wanted to say thank you to everyone. This conversation is incredibly important, and I feel that tonight is maybe extra important with everybody listening. And I just really appreciate everybody sharing. And I'm really looking forward to working together this year.
All right, so we will continue working on this. This will not be the last meeting that we will do this. And yeah, I think just reminders of the February 2nd meeting. And then I think working outside of this meeting environment is encouraged, because I think we can get more done if we do outside work. So hopefully be something that we discuss later, assign groups, assign individuals. Hey, if you can do this, that'd be great. After, outside the meetings, because that's how we will get things done, I think. And so, yeah, if nobody else has anything to say, I think this meeting's adjourned. And thank you for your thoughtful comments. And yeah, let's continue our work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Angelo.
Thank you, Chair.
Have a good night, everyone.
Good night.